hits for the bench. Extra attacker coming on to even things up. To the net, Albertson scores!
The Extra Attackers Podcast with Maude and Jordan.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Extra Attackers Podcast. Maude and Jordan back here once again after a very chaotic and kind of violent weekend in the NHL. How are you feeling, Jordan?
Pretty good. How about you, Maude?
Not too bad. Although, of course, we are going to be discussing suspensions and potential dirty plays today and hearings that are going on, which is not really my favorite topic in hockey usually. I don't like when we have to go over like all the controversial subjects like that in terms of like all of these plays usually involve someone getting injured, so it's just never fun, right?
Yeah, it's kind of awkward to talk about because you want to be respectful of the fact that someone did get hurt and that really sucks. But then you're also taking the context of what happened and being on either side, especially in a contentious incident. It's kind of awkward to toe that line between, yeah, I think everything that happened is either justified and fine, it was just a bad hockey hit, or that was intentional. That was something where like intent to injure. Separating that is always a bit awkward because people are really passionate when it's about their team, but
sure.
It's still important to talk about.
Yeah, and I guess we should note that we are currently recording this before any suspensions have been announced for either David Perron or Erik Gudbranson, who are both having hearings. We are going to be refreshing Twitter constantly to see if any news leaks out, especially for Perron, because his hearing has been taking place this afternoon. And it's entirely possible that by the time this episode is posted, that we will have the final word on maybe both suspensions or at least Perron's, because I don't know when Gudbranson's is taking place. But before we get into discussing those two, there was an incident as well that is not having a hearing, which was Ryan Strome kneeing Kyle Connor. And I was shocked that he doesn't have a hearing for this. I'll put it that way. What was your initial reaction to that incident?
Well, I remember you messaged me, Maude, and you're like, this is like the most like just straight on knee contact I've ever seen. And that's basically like the best way to describe it. Like it was full only knee contact. It wasn't even like the situation where it's like a body check that's kind of awkward. Maybe it just misses. No, like knees together, same point, and Connor goes flying, and that hurts. You know, like I'm surprised that he isn't like, I don't think he was injured on the play.
He's having an MRI tonight. So
sorry. Okay, so he was injured.
So
on the
he
play.
left the game, and we don't know how long he's going to be out yet.
Yeah, that really sucks. And even if it's something where, I mean, judging by how like knee on knee it was, it's hard to really say it wasn't intentional in some way. But at the same time, even if that was an accident, you need to be more careful. You need to be more aware of where you're skating and who you're going to be hitting where you're skating. Just because of that, I thought it was like deserving of at least a hearing.
Yeah, that's what shocked me. I guess the league decided that the 5-minute major and getting kicked out of the game was the appropriate punishment, but I don't know. I'm just looking at the video replay again here, and man, a lot of knee-on-knee collisions, you get a sort of a gray area where people argue like, well, he wasn't trying to hit the knee, he was going for like shoulder and chest contact, but then maybe the player who gets hit kind of tries to avoid that a little bit and avoid the hit, and then they end up taking the worst of it on their knee. But this was just straight up having your knee stretched out and only touching the knee. There wasn't like anything close to any other body contact other than the knee. So to me, it was like one of the ugliest ones I've ever seen in terms of knee on knee, at least recently. Like just how it was so clean, only the knee. So I can't believe that Strome isn't getting anything more than what he did get.
Yeah, like I feel like even if it was an accident, it's really, you see it so many times where the NHL calls them into a hearing anyway and just like deliberates. So it's kind of weird that we haven't really heard anything. I just hope Kyle Connor's okay and not like out for too long. I mean, he's one of the Jets' best players,
Yeah.
if not their best player. So hurts to lose him a ton if he is gone for a long time. But also the human element, like knees hurt a ton whenever you have a problem with your knee. It's awful. So hoping he's okay. But yeah, I agree. It's really weird that we didn't at least get something from the Department of Player Safety, like not even a fine, from what I understand. So
Hmm.
that's just kind of strange.
Yeah, there was a tweet from Mike McIntyre where he said this was an explanation that was given to him. The NHL believes Strome had planted his foot on the ice rather than deliberately extending it before the hit. So they said that it was reckless but not intentional, and that a 5-minute major and game ejection was sufficient punishment. And he said, of course, the Jets don't agree with that assessment, and they are angry that Strome isn't getting further punishment. I think it's probably true that his skate was planted, and he didn't stretch it out at the last second. But you also can't skate towards someone with your leg out like that. Just because your foot was already planted, you don't skate around with your leg stretched like that and then run into someone. So to me, that's just as bad. Like they're probably correct that it was just reckless and not malicious. But I feel like he should still be getting at least like a 1-game suspension.
I feel like they're probably arguing though that it was like in stride. That's probably what they think, that it was just
Maybe.
part of his normal skating and it happened to be. But like it is still kind of weird, like you said, how it's just so knee on knee
Mm-hmm.
that like it seems like weird that that would happen in a normal skating stride. So like even if it was reckless, and that was it, it wasn't intentional. Usually players still get something for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's. I mean, this is classic Department of Player Safety, where it's basically you spin the wheel, and whatever punishment it is, that's what you get. Like you'll have a couple consistent punishments in a row where you're like, oh yeah, the severity makes sense, and then you see something egregious, and they're like, that's a fine. It's
Mm-hmm.
really weird how they decide these sorts of things.
Yeah, it's gonna be funny if for the other two incidents that we're about to discuss that are having hearings, because since they weren't announced yet what the results of the hearings are, we're gonna get to make our guesses, and then they're probably going to be immediately like incorrect as soon as before this episode even goes out, possibly. So I guess with that, since we don't need to predict anything for Ryan Strome, he's not getting anything. Let's shift to Erik Gudbranson in Columbus, who's having a hearing today. It seems to be going on currently. That was under the Rule 46.2 aggressor for an altercation with Florida's Nick Cousins. And this was basically Goodbranson just straight up jumping a guy. I don't know if anyone remembers Matt Carkner on Brian Boyle in the 2012 playoffs, but it was literally that, where your whole team is just angry at a player after something that they did, and then your tough guy goes and just jumps on him, tries to fight him, the guy turtles, and then during the turtling, the player just keeps throwing shots at him. He got a few shots in at Cousins' head when Cousins was not engaging whatsoever. But the discussion around this, from most people that I've seen, has been that Cousins deserved it because he did a dirty hit on Gudbranson earlier in the game. But of course, Cousins is not facing any supplemental discipline, whereas Gudbranson is. What do you think about Gudbranson being the only person to potentially face punishment here?
I think that it's complicated. I think that the initial Cousins hit is really bad. I don't think it's intentional, but I think it's just a really bad hit where he mostly makes head contact with Gudbranson along the boards. I understand why Gudbranson is upset. Um, and the talking point that I've seen around this incident a lot is none of what happens with Gudbranson happens if you throw Nick Cousins out. If you give
Mm-hmm.
him a major and he's out of the game, none of that happens. And I do think that's probably true. And I think the refs probably could have handled that better. It was a hit that honestly, getting ejected was probably justifiable for how reckless it was and how dangerous. All that being said, how Gabranson responded is never okay, and you
Yeah.
can never do that. There are like hockey is a very specific sport where you are like getting out your aggression on another player is mostly acceptable if it's done through the right channels, whether it's through a fight, a big hit during play. It's okay to do that. And players understand that it's okay to do it and they're ready for it. So if Gudbranson had tried to fight Cousins, had given like a big clean hit in open ice or something like that, that's totally fine. But to come out to a player who's not expecting any sort of altercation, to jump him, throw him to the ice, and then start wailing on the back of his head, not okay. Can never happen. Like, you cannot just see the red mist like that and act upon it. You need to have some self-control. And it, like, in society, it's not even an eye for an eye in any sort of punishment. Just because someone did a very bad hit to you that could have injured you doesn't give you the justification to do the exact same to them, even if they were the aggressor. So even though I think that Nick Cousins probably should have been thrown out of the game, I don't think that that's enough of an excuse to justify what Gudbranson did. I think he deserves this hearing, and he, like, the suspension he receives, it's going to be way harsher than whatever Nick Cousins get, and it looks like it's nothing, and I think that's deserved, honestly.
Yeah, I think I 100% agree with everything you've said there. The one thing that I wonder about that makes this situation a little murky in my mind is that Gudbranson was just trying to fight Cousins, and Cousins kind of made the smart play of just turtling and taking those shots. It was sort of like using your opponent's anger to your advantage, really, because I'm sure the way that we all would have liked to see it play out is that they just fought each other, right? And Gudbranson can kind of get his revenge. But instead, Cousins wasn't going to fight because I guess he's a bit of a rat. He was being a little bit of a weasel. But it was the correct play for his team from a team standpoint, because Gudbranson got 7 minutes of penalties and the Panthers had a 7-minute power play after that. So if Cousins had fought him, then it would have just been offsetting fighting majors. So even though I don't think that Gudbranson should have just pummeled Cousins while he was on the ice, I do understand why he tried to fight him. And if Cousins had just like answered the call and like stuck up for himself after throwing that questionable hit, then Gudbranson wouldn't really be in this situation. But I do also think that just because Cousins turtled, Gudbranson should have realized that it wasn't going to go too well for him just throwing a bunch of shots at Cousins while he was on the ground, right? Like, at that point, you've just lost your cool, and it was pretty obvious to me that he was going to get suspended as soon as he did that. So I feel like it was a little bit of like manipulation from Cousins to not engage in a fight and just bait Gudbranson into this incident. But it's tough because it is correct that Cousins probably also should have gotten thrown out of the game, and that would have prevented this whole situation. But I feel like Gudbranson ends up looking worse in the end just because he totally lost his cool and he cost his team. Because again, if Cousins turtles, stop throwing punches at him, and then maybe one of his other teammates will come over and defend him, and then you can get in a fight with them, at least get your rage out somehow, right? So I feel like Gudbranson, it's going to be a deserved suspension when he does get one. I would say probably 1 game, maybe 2. What do you think?
I think, honestly, I would like to see harsher suspensions for this type of incident, because it is very clearly just like, you completely lost control and your intent is to hurt that person at that point. Like, I think it's probably going to be like 2 or 3 games. What I would want would probably be around 5 games, like a harsher penalty, because that's not acceptable in any circumstance. I do like you made a good point though. I didn't think about that, how like he probably went and asked Cousins to fight and just got more annoyed when he said, no, I'm not doing it.
Well, they were screaming at each other in the penalty box the whole time. From the initial scrum, like when Cousins hit Gudbranson at first, he tried to fight him after, and Cousins wouldn't fight him. They both ended up with roughing penalties or whatever, and Gudbranson was screaming at Cousins in the penalty box the whole time. So Cousins knew that Gudbranson was going to come after him, and we know how it played out after that.
Right. And like I understand, like you said, from a strategic point of view, why Cousins might turtle. It might just be like, no, I'm not engaging in this. I can get penalties. And at that point, it's up to Gudbranson. Like, literally, once you throw him to the ground and you see him turtle, you take your roughing penalty and then be done with it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, again, there are more opportunities to get back at Cousins later in the game, whether it's going up with your team and actually beating the Panthers, or even just delivering a big body check or something like that. As long as you're doing it safely, like, there are other ways to do that. It's just, once you just see that cloud of red, you cannot act upon it. Like, you need to have self-control. And because of how bad it looks, just wailing on the back of a player's head, I think he deserves 5. I don't think he'll get that, but I think it's what he deserves.
I agree that it should be longer suspensions for this type of incident where it's totally not a hockey play. But I don't know if the league is going to agree with that. I think they might just think like, oh, well, he threw a couple shots at a guy and you can't do that. So they'll consider it like 1 or 2 games. But I do agree with you when you're not even trying to make a play and you're just straight up violently going after a guy, I think it should be more games. So I think the fact that it wasn't tweeted as being an in-person hearing, I think that means it will be below 5. But I don't know.
Right.
I don't know for sure if that's how that works. Do you think that's correct?
From what I remember, yes. If you're offered an in-person hearing that allows the NHL to go 5 games or more, if it's just a phone hearing, I think it has to be under 5.
Yeah, because the David Perron hearing, which we might as well shift to now, was announced as specifically being an in-person hearing, whereas the Gudbranson one wasn't. It just said like hearing, just standard hearing, I guess. So David Perron, after the incident that happened to his captain, Dylan Larkin, obviously everyone knows about this already. Not sure how much I want to go into detail on Larkin's injury, but of course, before we talk about it, we do want to say that we are, of course, concerned for Larkin and his family. It seems that he is in solid, stable condition right now. Of course, just recovering from whatever the injury is. They've been kind of vague on the details so far, but it seems like it's probably not going to be something that's like super threatening to his career. So that's obviously the outcome that everyone wants to see. But there is additional drama going on, obviously, because David Braun is getting a hearing for his retaliation, whereas the Sens players who inadvertently took out Larkin are not getting anything at all. So what do you think about that? I'll throw it to you to start.
Well, like you said, want to preface that I do feel for Larkin. I really hope he's okay. And it's been a rough week for that family. Earlier this week, I believe we heard that his wife had a stillborn, unfortunately, which you never want to hear that. That's just awful. And I really hope that he's doing okay, him and his family. To get into the nitty gritty, though, of the incident, it is always really scary to see a player lying there motionless like Larkin was. It was really scary to me. I can't believe he didn't need a stretcher. That was great. But I understand why there are a lot of very, very personal feelings about this, because that is just, like I said, a scary imagery. And just to lay the groundwork as to what happened, from what we can see in slow motion, from seeing the clip a repeated amount of times, there was a net battle going on in front between Dylan Larkin and Matthew Joseph of the Sens. Joseph goes to push Larson away from the front of the net. Joseph's push is too high, and he basically pushes his head or upper body. His head and upper body reacts to being pushed, and unfortunately skating towards the front of the net to help support is Parker Kelly. And as he's skating to the front, Larkin gets pushed into Parker Kelly. It seems like the butt end of Parker Kelly's stick hits Larkin somewhere in the face, and he goes unconscious. That, from all the sources I've seen, is the best recollection I can say of what happened. What happens immediately after that, though, is Larkin, of course, falls down to the ice. Everyone's just kind of confused as to what happened. Zub and Matthew Joseph are right by Larkin, so they immediately call over for trainers because, again, it looks really bad. They want help right away. As Zub is calling for a trainer, David Perron comes up from his side and just cross-checks Zub right in the face, like completely out of nowhere. Zub, of course, starts to turtle on the play, and Perron is pulled back from by other Senators players, and the refs try to separate things. This creates a scrum around Larkin, who is unconscious, which is also really dangerous. Fortunately, nothing more happened with that. And that's basically the situation. A lot of Sens fans are saying that it's completely accidental, and it was just a situation of Joseph giving a push that was too high. He didn't mean to check Larkin in the head. It was just like he was, of course, like uncareful. He should have been less reckless in what happened in pushing his upper body. But it's not that push that caused Larkin to go unconscious. It was the unfortunate push into Parker Kelly. It's just a freak accident. And then, of course, Red Wings fans will say that Joseph intentionally cross-checked Larkin in the face. That's what caused the injury, and David Perron was only backing up his teammate by like going after Zub. Of course, we're both Sens fans here, so there's a lot of bias that comes into this conversation as it involves Sens players. I personally think that if you watch the clip and you like pay attention to what's happening in slow motion, it is abundantly clear that Joseph did not mean to hit Larkin in the face like he did. And it wasn't a cross check to the face. He was just trying to push Larkin away from the net. It was too high. That is definitely true. On the play, Joseph got a roughing penalty, and it was definitely deserved. However, Joseph did not mean to just cross-check Larkin in the face. It's not Joseph's contact that caused Larkin to go unconscious. That is abundantly clear when you watch the clip. It is the fact that he hit Parker Kelly after. And I think factually, just looking at the objective clips that we have, that is what happened. The issue here is that Red Wings fans are all claiming that Joseph did it on purpose. They're also claiming that what Perron did after was justified because he just saw his captain laying down. I've given you a bit of an overview, Maude. I wanted to see what you think about it first before I dive into it.
First of all, anyone claiming that Joseph cross-checked Larkin is just literally blind because he only had one hand on his stick, and it is physically impossible to cross-check someone with only one hand on your stick. And you can see very clearly on the reverse angle slow-mo that it's not the stick that even really touches Larkin's head. Maybe it rides up on his back a little bit, but it's a little bit of glove contact from each glove of Joseph. That again was obviously too high and is definitely a 2-minute roughing minor, which is what he got. And it is also very obvious to me that Larkin would not have been knocked out if it wasn't for Kelly coming back and accidentally bumping into him. So I cannot understand people saying that Joseph knocked out Larkin on purpose. I think it is just a like clearly erroneous take. And it's just like, to me, I don't know what these people are watching. I feel like these people who say that Joseph did it on purpose are just looking at the end result and not actually properly analyzing the play. And they're just being emotional and seeing their captain injured, which I get it. It's very, very startling and shocking. When I saw Larkin lying there in the moment, I thought like he broke his neck or something, because I've never seen a player lie motionless for that long, or at least in quite a while. I haven't seen that in the longest time, and my heart sank. I was like very scared for him in that moment. But then it was clear in the replay that no one did anything intentional. So Red Wings fans, I get that they're going to be very emotional about it, but it just seems to me that they are incapable of analyzing the play without their emotions taking over, because I haven't seen any like actual breakdowns of the play from Red Wings fans. I've only seen them selectively showing certain freeze frames and stuff like that, or just showing the angle that is from the other side where you can't really see Joseph's hands or his stick, and they're just blaming him when it doesn't make any sense, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I think the discourse around it has evolved to be very ugly, unfortunately. Like, I know it's not all Red Wings fans, like make that clear, but there are a lot of Red Wings fans that are falling on, frankly, racist statements. And they some of them seem to just want to criminalize Joseph because of his skin color. When I agree with you, if you view the clip in a completely objective manner, I think 110% it looks like an accident. And I think what's even more indicative of that fact is in every single thread or post I've seen that has been just like collective, every NHL fan has been able to respond to it, to view it. Every single time, the top comment is always, that was an accident. That sucks.
Yeah.
Or that play, it's awkward as hell, but the refs got it right. Those were the right calls. The only times I've been seeing people saying otherwise, saying that Joseph did it on purpose, or that David Perron was justified in just cross-checking Zub in the top of the head afterward, they're all Red Wings centered posts, or they're posts from the NHL that directly reference the Red Wings. It's whenever the Red Wings fans get involved exclusively that you see the narrative being pushed. And it makes sense because there's a lot of them. Their original 6 team, there's a ton of Red Wings fans. But from looking outside of those instances, it's incredibly clear that the general consensus is that it was an accident and that the refs made the right call. And that's what happened here. If you're claiming any other version of events, you're being disingenuous and you're just trying to make Joseph look bad, either because you're angry with what happened on the play, which I understand, or you're just a pathetic racist, which is also unfortunately what we're seeing too. And I mean, again, it's absolutely crazy that some of these people are just justifying what Perron did. A second after, they're like, oh, well, he saw his captain down. He attacked someone who wasn't even a part of the play with the express purpose to hurt Zub. It's incredibly lucky that Zub wasn't hurt on the play. He had a concussion earlier this year, or I think it was concussion / broken jaw earlier this year. Like, that's incredibly dangerous. He has a history for it. Like, it's no surprise to me that Perron got offered an in-person hearing for this. He deserves 5+ games for what he did. You cannot do that. That's like a complete, again, same as Gudbranson, complete red mist moment where you need to control yourself. And I understand, like, fighting Joseph. Joseph fought later in the game. That's how you handle it. That's how you that's how you take care of these events. You don't just attack a random player before you even know what happened. You don't just get your piece of flesh. That's not how it works anymore. We're not in the 1980s of the NHL. So yeah, I think a lot of Red Wings fans are being purposely disingenuous. They're not able to look past their own emotional biases, and they're just happy with the fact that a Perron went to get his pound of flesh without realizing that was incredibly dangerous. So yeah, I mean, it's incredibly clear what happened if you're looking at it objectively. And I think this will blow over, but a lot of Red Wings fans look really bad right now for how they're reacting. And it's contributing to like a more ferocious rivalry with the Sens, which can be fun. But at the same time, I think it's too negative at this point in a lot of ways. Exactly. It's not about just having fun in having two teams that are going for the same goal this season. It's about directly attacking the people involved for a lot of Red Wings fans at this point, and that's really not cool. I'm not going to pretend like Sens fans wouldn't be doing the same thing at this juncture, at least some Sens fans, if the situations were reversed. But I would hope that I would be able to look at it level-headedly and maybe in the moment be angry, but come out afterward and say, okay, this is what happened. I can see why. I made an error in my previous judgment. I've barely seen any Red Wings fans take that position.
Yeah, not at all. They're all doubling and tripling and quadrupling down. And
exactly,
you're 100% correct that it is literally only Red Wings fans. I haven't seen a single neutral fan like side with the Red Wings fans, which is shocking to me, and that makes me believe that I'm not being biased in this case. And like, I saw some Red Wings fans try to use the argument that like, oh, if you saw Tkachuk laying on the ice like this, you would have reacted the same and you would want the retribution as well. And it's like, no, I'm not insane. Like, what kind of an argument is my reaction was irrational, but you would have done it too, which makes it okay? It's like, no, I get that there's a lot of emotion in it, but it's just too much. It's just ridiculous. And especially in terms of trying to justify what Perron did, that's the most disgusting thing to me. It's one thing to try to argue that Joseph deserves anything, but it's much worse to me. It's much of a worse look to be defending Perron and saying that it was okay what he did because it was some sort of revenge, which first of all, didn't get the right player. And second of all, the major thing here is you literally never attack anyone with your stick. Swinging your stick at anyone like that, especially like with a cross check right up high, is always cracked down on by the NHL. They are they have been very harsh in the last couple seasons on cross checks that get up high during play, which a lot of the time ends up being an accident if it's in like a net front battle. But the key thing here is that it wasn't a hockey play. It wasn't a net front battle. He literally just saw red and decided to attack a random player who was calling for the trainer at the time because he was worried for Larkin lying there on the ice, and Perron decided to fucking attack him. And I think the NHL also needs to look at the fact that Perron has a little bit of a history of having, or like being a hothead. He hasn't been suspended before, but I would like to bring up the Blues and Avalanche playoff series from a few years ago when Perron was still on the Blues. How he tried to like absolutely murder Nazem Kadri on multiple occasions. What had happened was Nazem Kadri had slid into Jordan Binnington and injured him when Binnington was like playing lights out and was the only reason the Blues were in the series. And Blues fans tried to say that Kadri did it on purpose because Kadri has a bit of a reputation for cheap shots, but it was a play where he slid into the goalie, so it was a huge stretch. But regardless, that didn't stop the Blues players themselves from being like completely distracted and pissed off at Kadri. There was a play where Kadri scored and David Perron comes flying over. You can find the clip on YouTube. He comes flying over and leads in with his shoulder and jumps with his shoulder right towards Kadri's head, and Kadri gets out of the way. It was one of the most ridiculous cheap shot attempts I've ever seen after the play, after Kadri scored, and just because it didn't connect and Perron missed, no one talks about it. But if he landed that, he would have been suspended for multiple games and he would already have a suspension history. And there's also a separate incident in the same playoff series you can find on YouTube where I believe it's, I don't think it was during the play, I think it was after a whistle, where he literally just runs at full speed, comes with the cross check again, right at Kadri, and he didn't hit him up high, but he hit him like in the midsection, and it was literally like a diving, jumping cross check, and tackles him, leading with the stick with the cross check, and then starts like wailing on him, and then the refs come in to try to break up the scrum. So this guy is a hot-headed idiot, in my opinion, and I was not surprised at all when I saw him do that, and I believe that he needs to get the book thrown at him. I'm very glad that it's an in-person hearing, meaning that it can be more than 5 games, and I really hope that it is more than 5 games.
It should be. You cannot do that. Like, throw the book whenever a player does something outside of a play that's directly intended to injure a player.
Exactly.
You cannot have that in the game. And like, I barely remembered the incidences that you mentioned, but they're important. So thanks for refreshing my memory, because that's really bad. And if he has a history of this, like, you got to tell him, no, now this can't happen again, or else he's going to do something and actually get someone really hurt in the future. He's lucky that he hasn't hurt Kadri. He's lucky he didn't hurt Zub. He needs to get his act together. Also, speaking of the history component of it, I saw a bunch of people bring up how Joseph, when he was on Tampa, had another incident with Larkin where he checked Larkin, and then Larkin didn't like the check, so he basically just punched Joseph right in the face. This was all during play, by the way.
Punch.
Yeah, a sucker punch. I've seen people bring up the fact that that history exists, and maybe that's motive for Joseph to do what he did. First of all, even if I was to consider that as a valuable argument, which I don't, because it doesn't make a lot of sense, considering Joseph is the one that took the brunt of what happened in that play. And I don't know why he'd want to rekindle that specifically, but also the play happens way too quickly for him to do that intentionally, even to recognize that it is Larkin. It's irrelevant to what happened. Even if the shove was Joseph going a little high to, like, for some reason trying to get back at Larkin. I don't know how a high shove is supposed to do that, but also even if it was, it isn't what injured Larkin in the first place. So again, it's completely irrelevant. And I think that, like, looking back at that former history doesn't really do a lot here, because it's a completely different play. Like we said, it's an accident that happens really quickly. So I think all of that is just completely irrelevant to what took place in this matter. This wasn't Joseph trying to get back. It was just a freak accident, and it's just a coincidence that there happens to be history there. And I just think it's gross that Red Wings fans right now, some Red Wings fans, are just pulling on every thread to try to make it seem like Joseph is the biggest villain. He should be getting suspended. And there's a bunch of cocky tweets on, like, the announcement that it was an in-person hearing for Perron that is like, okay, when's Joseph getting suspended then? When's Joseph's in-person hearing? When it's like, you're stupid. You didn't actually watch what happened, and you're just reacting out of pure emotion and not trying to look at this objectively. Like, the only Red Wings fans comments that I've seen that have been in support of Joseph and being like, yeah, that was a freak accident, have been the top comments on neutral posts, on neutral NHL forums, where they're like, yeah, you can't blame Joseph. And of course they get a bunch of upvotes because everyone agrees with them. That's what happened. Of course you don't see, like, a bunch of upvotes where they're like, yeah, Joseph is a monster. I can't wait till the next time we meet. He should get decked. We're not seeing that because people understand that's not what happened. They understand that those people are idiots.
That's the most disgusting part to me, is all of the Red Wings fans who still 2 days later are calling for violence, literal violence, to happen against Joseph next time these two teams meet, saying stuff like, oh, we need to just, like, straight up go after him and not even worry about the game. We need to get as many goons in the lineup as possible. It's just disgusting. I don't understand this eye for an eye mob mentality that they need to have a villain. They need retribution for what happened, even though it was very clearly an accident. Like, they're acting like he's Tom Wilson just because there was an incident with him and Larkin before, even though it's like a clear coincidence in my mind that it was the two of them battling in front of the net and Joseph just happened to shove him a little too high. Like, that wouldn't, like you said, even if that was the contact that knocked Larkin out, that's not something that I think would be like looked at in his mind as like revenge for what happened before. Like, that's ridiculous. That's just assuming that Joseph is a fucking supervillain and just like has murder on his mind at all times. Like, that's not like where I feel like we've lost the humanity in this situation.
Exactly. And also, all that completely ignores the fact that Larkin and Joseph have played each other multiple times since that initial incident.
Yeah, lots of times.
Exactly. Why would it be about it now?
Mm-hmm.
And like, I understand, like, when the Sens and Red Wings meet again, having like a big checking game, like maybe you deliver your hits harder, maybe there's another fight. And all that is fine and dandy. But there's a lot of Red Wings fans that are like very specifically, in some cases, calling for Joseph's head in a way that's like, go get him after the play. And that's not cool. You can't do that. It's the exact reason Perron got suspended. You can't call for that. You can't encourage it. And frankly, the people that are trying to call for it, garbage human beings.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I completely get if you want the Red Wings to come in and play Ottawa hard, if it's like a scrappy game. I totally understand that. That's completely justified. It's a part of hockey. Anything more than that, you're just hoping someone else gets hurt and you're as bad as Perron.
Exactly.
That's just the truth of it.
Mm-hmm. So, still no announcement on the suspension. I was hoping it would drop during our segment, but so we'll have to see where it goes. I think. Do you want to make like a final prediction on how many games you think it will be?
Yeah, I guess I will. I think one thing that's interesting to point out about the situation, when the refs were reviewing the major penalty, as they always do, they always review it now. They are in direct contact with the NHL in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
And that was part of the reason why, when the penalties were actually doled out, Perron got the game misconduct, not Joseph. Joseph and Parker Kelly only got roughing penalties because they saw what happened. They were like, okay, obviously it was an accident. They get roughing penalties, but Perron, that was not an accident. Intent to injure, you're thrown out. So they've seen this, the NHL already. They imposed a harsh penalty by selecting Perron out of that group and saying he deserved a game misconduct. And because of that, and it immediately being an in-person hearing, I think the NHL might be more ready to throw the book at Perron a little bit in this instance, just to be very clear, this can't happen.
Mm-hmm.
So realistically, like, I think it'll probably be around 5 or 6 games, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was a little harsher, if you got 7 or 8 games in there, just to be like, no, this can't happen. Like, completely unacceptable. Just because it's kind of seems that's how the NHL handled it the first time around when they were directly involved. So my guess, honestly, 6 or 7 games, I'm going to say.
Yeah, I'm going to randomly say 5 because I feel like when you hear about the in-person hearing, everyone's like, oh, it's going to be way more than 5, but then I feel like it will be a little more tame than that and just be like right on the nose, 5. But I do personally hope that it's more than that. I think Perron needs a harsher punishment. Like, I have been concussed from a cross-check to the back of the head in my life. So the fact that Zub isn't injured is incredibly lucky. And in my opinion, it's one of the dumbest plays you can make in hockey. It's not even a play. It's one of the dumbest, like, dirty things you can do in hockey. It is like 10 times worse than, for example, Gudbranson throwing a couple punches at the guy while he's turtling. It's so much worse. So I need to see Perron's suspension being much worse than Gudbranson's.
Yeah, I kind of need to see that too. It's a completely unacceptable situation. And in the same way how we were surprised when the Sens received their punishment of a first-round pick, I hope that the majority of Detroit fans are surprised when Perron gets suspended because
I can't wait for the shitstorm from them, dude. As soon as I'm gonna be refreshing Twitter, like even as soon as we're done, and just waiting to see all the copium from the Red Wings fans because. I mean, on one hand, it's gonna suck because they're probably gonna continue to say a bunch more horrible things, but on the other hand, it's gonna be funny too because they're gonna be crybabies about it.
It's gonna be fun to drink their tears, especially since we did beat them 5-1 in that game.
Mm-hmm,
so
mm-hmm.
I mean, all that fuss for nothing, for just laying a complete egg. Okay.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
that's what you want, I guess you got what you wanted out of that game.
Yeah, they can try to shit talk the Sens all they want, but we have beaten them twice so far this season. We're currently leading the season series, so they can't shit talk too much.
Exactly. And like frankly, it like I would understand being upset hearing about a suspension and knowing that you're going to lose a top player for a while, but the fact that Matthew Joseph has had to private or limit a lot of his socials because of what happened,
Yeah.
you deserve it. The
Mm-hmm.
fan base deserves a harsh suspension. That's the be all and end all of it, in my opinion.
Man, I don't understand what kind of mental state you need to be in to go find a player's social media who isn't even from your own team. Because I don't even follow the social medias of the team's players that I support. Much less am I going
Same
to go
here.
search out someone on the other team that I'm mad at and say some absolutely deranged shit to them in their comments or send them a DM. I don't understand how like mentally unstable you have to be to do that. Like are we just like walking around in society with a bunch of people who do this, or is it just like the really mentally ill people? Because it seems like such bizarre behavior to me that anyone who does that needs help.
I agree. And I mean, we're seeing it more and more with social media. And unfortunately, I think social media just kind of breeds this environment. You kind of have this weird parasocial relationship with people, and that you
Yeah.
can get in contact with them while not actually seeing their face and seeing how they react to things. So you can say whatever like messed up shit you want and not feel bad about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that contributes to this too. And I will say, like, it's probably a vocal minority of Red Wings fans that are going that far, but it's still incredible to me that there's some people that think that that's a justified response or feel like they have to hold the torch for the team in this and be like, no, you guys don't worry about it, I'll go get him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not that deep, it's just hockey. Like, you pull away from it a little bit. It's just a game that we enjoy and we share that enjoyment. You're not getting anything by shutting someone down and making them feel like garbage in this space. Like,
Exactly. They should be focused on wishing Larkin well in his recovery and channeling more positive energy
exactly.
into that side of things instead of just spreading the negativity everywhere. I think it's ridiculous.
Exactly. And I feel like with Joseph, he's not a repeat offender, really. So it's this is less of a point. But even when you see someone who is a repeat offender, I feel like a lot of people just jump on like they're terrible human beings and things like that. But a lot of them like need help. Like anger management is a big thing too. So
Mm-hmm.
even if you think that Joseph did this on purpose, or in another situation you think someone does it on purpose, I think it's way more productive to wish them well, and like I hope that like the suspension clocks with you. Like you learn from what you saw and you're better next time. Like it should never be like you should feel like garbage and wish that you are garbage for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Like it should be something that a player can move on and learn from. And they're not being conductive to that by just saying all these terrible things, right? So
Mm-hmm.
all that to say, in so many angles, it's just so wrong, and it really sucks to see it. And it sucks to be like, God, not even Leaf fans are this bad normally. Like it's
Seriously.
incredible to get that opinion from me.
I like hate Leafs fans and Habs fans, not all of them, of course, but
Mm-hmm.
Detroit fans have taken the cake in terms of just being the most like malicious and like bloodthirsty fan base I've ever seen, and just like low IQ, to be honest, in terms of not being able to analyze the plays at all. Um, it's it's tough. I'm like not even. This is the thing you were saying about the rivalry earlier. I'm not even really excited to play the Red Wings again because it's just going to be a shit show like on social media and stuff again. Like it's not a fun
Exactly.
rivalry at the moment.
At the very least, like we said, Toronto fans and Montreal fans, they're not all bad, but there's some really bad ones. At least I can kind of get excited for those games in a different way, that it's a fun spectacle and
Hmm.
like it's a huge rivalry, right?
It's
Like,
more like you'll get friendly chirping between the fan bases, whereas
yeah, yeah.
with Detroit, it's just like we hate all of you from both sides, from both Sens fans and Detroit fans. It's not
Oh
fun.
yeah. It's filled with malice, and it's kind of incredible that it's got to that point.
Hmm.
And it sucks. I agree. I'm not super excited for the next Red Wings game. Like like it's not super fun to just hope that we clobber them 6-0 so that they don't like flood our socials with a bunch of like deranged garbage if they won.
Hmm.
Like, so Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate with how it's played down, and it will die down and things will get better. I just hope that calmer heads prevail at the end of it, and the people who have really overreacted are just kind of forgotten about.
I hope so too. Um, Last note before we wrap up, I thought it would be interesting to look at what the most recent suspensions that were more than 5 games were. So the other players who have most recently received in-person hearings. The last one was Brad Marchand getting suspended for 6 games for sucker punching Tristan Jerry, like after the play, right? So that's another incident where it was not a hockey play whatsoever. The play had stopped, and then you just go after someone. And then the second most recent, which I believe was 5 games, was Brendan Lemieux biting Brady Tkachuk's finger,
Oh my god, I forgot about
which
that.
which is a hilarious one, but also another example of something that wasn't a hockey play and wasn't during play. It was during a scrum. I almost feel like even though biting is so ridiculously bad, and
That
just
is
because
crazy.
it's so childish and like gross, and needed to be punished, I feel like Perron's is worse than both of those, because both of those are like heat of the moment in a scrum. Like Marchand took a cheap shot at the goalie during a net front battle, like after the whistle had blown, so it wasn't a hockey play, and obviously sucker punching a goalie is ridiculous, but it was a whole bunch of bodies around, they're all fighting, and then Lemieux, he was in a direct altercation with Kachuk when he did that, whereas Perron, there was nothing happening. Everyone had stopped playing because they were trying to alert the trainers to come help Larkin, and then Perron decides that he wants to decapitate someone. So I feel like Perron's is worse than both of those two most recent suspensions that went over the 5 game mark.
It's good to have those barometers because it can give us a clue. It's just the suspension the suspensions the NHL gives out are so random that it's even hard to predict off of that. I do think that both of those incidences are not as severe. Like literally cross-checking someone in the back of the head who is calling for help for your teammate. It's not even a scrum. Crazy. He deserves at least 6 or 7 games in my opinion, but honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if it settles around 5, like your prediction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I guess we'll see. And I think that's where we're gonna leave it for today. It was big topics in this weekend was just entirely about player safety and the potential suspensions with all these incidents. It sucks seeing all these type of incidents happening in close quarters, or in like close in terms of
Proximity.
time, you know? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because typically it's more spread out, and the sport is not that dirty. You get the occasional dirty plays, but so it sucks to see a lot of that happening at once, and then it kind of feels like it's a bad look for the sport.
Yeah, that part is kind of rough. And it's weird because I don't remember the last time where we had a situation like this where legitimately like 2 or 3 suspension worthy incidences happened like within the same day almost.
Exactly. That's what I was trying to say.
It's pretty unprecedented. So we have to talk about it because it's the biggest stories, obviously, but hopefully we get some more enveloping, engaging storylines over the next week or so instead of just more players just unloading on each other because that's not what you want to see. It's not hockey, so
Mm-hmm.
hopefully it gets nipped in the bud and then we move on.
Yep. Totally agree. Hopefully we can have some more positive topics to discuss next week. But yeah, I think that's where we're going to leave it. Thank you everyone so much for watching or listening. You can follow us on Twitter at Extra Attackers. I am at Mod Show and Jordan at Saint of Stutza. You can find the ats in the description as well.
Thanks for watching, everyone, and as well, comment, suggest things that you might like to see in the future or ways that we can improve. And we'll be back next week for another Extra Attacker. So have a good week, everyone.